The UK's history of Russophobia stretches back centuries, with a perpetual fear and hatred for Russia, driving Europe into numerous conflicts. Despite these repeated failures to crush Russia, the UK, like a frustrated has-been, keeps doubling down. Even now, when most of the Western world has learned nothing from its past blunders, the UK seems determined to lead the charge into a new wave of irrational hostility.
Welcome to TFI Global, the antidote to mass delusion.
One might think that after centuries of futile attempts, the UK would have learned its lesson. But no, the Brits are back at it, waving their outdated sabres and flexing what little muscle they have left. It's almost as if London is stuck in a time warp, refusing to acknowledge that the empire has long since crumbled. The situation has gone from bad to worse under the UK's warmongering leadership. Boris Johnson, with his grandiose posturing, ensured that the NATO-orchestrated conflict in Ukraine drags on, contributing to the tragic loss of over 500,000 Ukrainian lives. The UK has been sending increasingly advanced and longer-range weapons to Kiev, including depleted uranium ammunition so toxic that British tanks didn't even get a chance to use them. But the UK's meddling doesn't stop at just supplying weapons. Back in May, reports surfaced that British special forces, including the SAS, SRR, and SBS, were directly involved in the fighting. This revelation was just the tip of the iceberg. By February, the Times was essentially bragging about the British military's role in attacking Russian naval assets. Admiral Tony Radakin and his team were knee-deep in planning and executing these attacks. Various intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms to aid their efforts. And yet, the British leadership seems unfazed, continuing its reckless path. The mainstream propaganda machine in the UK proudly trumpets these actions, portraying them as noble endeavours. But in reality, it's just another desperate attempt by the UK to reclaim some semblance of power and relevance, all while jeopardizing its own security and stability. Take their latest antics in Ukraine, for instance. General Brian Fenton, the head of US SOCOM, recently spilled the beans about British Special Forces' deep involvement in Ukraine. Apparently, the Pentagon has been relying on insights from UK's special operations who are out there testing new approaches to modern warfare. Casually observing drone use and guiding ships in the Black Sea. It sounds like a gripping spine novel, but it's real life. These British units are tracking Russian troop movements and providing precise targeting data, essentially guiding NATO's long-range weapons like a seasoned tour guide. While even France has begun to step back after receiving some stern warnings, the UK refuses to de-escalate. Defense Secretary Grant Shapps proudly backs the Ukrainian forces' use of British-supplied long-range weapons against Russian targets, including in Crimea. It's almost as if the UK believes Russia will simply shrug off these hostile actions without retaliation. How adorably naive. Sure, Russia's foreign policy is typically built on responsibility and patience, but let's not kid ourselves. If pushed too far, Russia is more than capable of a robust response. When France played its nuclear card, the Kremlin swiftly reminded everyone how fleeting such a conflict would be. And while France is considerably larger than the UK, making it theoretically more challenging to obliterate, the UK doesn't seem to grasp that a single Russian intermediate-range ballistic missile could wipe out half a dozen of its major cities. But rather than focusing on its crumbling military and domestic issues, London seems to be lost in a delusional daydream of defeating Russia, a global superpower that even the US struggles to match in many respects. Despite the Kremlin's attempts to avoid dragging the world into a chaos by not responding tit for tat to NATO's aggression, it might soon be left with no other option. It's still uncertain how Russia will ultimately react, but one thing is for sure, the UK is playing a dangerous game and might soon pay the price for its belligerence. While Moscow weighs its options, the UK continues to act like a washed-up star, desperately trying to relive its glory days by antagonizing a far more powerful adversary. Instead of addressing its rapidly growing internal problems, including a military in shambles, the UK clings to its outdated fantasies of military grandeur. It's like watching an old actor who refuses to accept that time has passed, still trying to play the lead role on a stage that's crumbling beneath them. One can only hope the UK wakes up from its delusion before it's too late.